I'm J.R. Church. Welcome to today's analysis of the news. Well, it's snowing here in Oklahoma City, and it's been freezing for the last couple of days. So instead of going to the office to do this webcast, we brought the camera home and are doing it from my house. Got an interesting story here that came out of the Gaza war. Oh, by the way, tomorrow morning I'm going to have surgery. So you be praying for me, will you? I'll be going in the morning and having the 2 tumors that are on my liver ablated. So be praying for me. I'd appreciate that. On January the 20th, former Chief Rabbi Mordecai Eliyahu, and this comes, by the way, from Israel National News. He was recovering from a life-threatening disease, but he went to the tomb of the biblical matriarch Rachel, and he prayed 3 times before the recent war in Gaza. And then his son, the story was first told by Rabbi Lazar Brody, a rabbi in Ashdod who devotes his time to spreading the faith around the globe. And he told Israel National News that he received many phone calls in the framework of his work, including a particularly noteworthy one about 2 weeks ago. The caller, an Israeli man, was clearly knowledgeable about how IDF infantry troops operate. He said, "My son is in the Gavanti Brigade, and his unit's job is to clean out areas around Gaza City. Outside one house, a woman dressed in black started yelling at them in Arabic. 'Get out of here, it's dangerous.' The troops thought she might be trying to protect her family, but they didn't want to take chances. So the company commander called the regiment commander, and they went on to their next target. There, too, the same woman appeared and gave the same warning. The soldiers thought she probably came somehow through the tunnel network that Hamas had set up between houses, and one of the soldiers even yelled at her. Then they went to a third house, and the same woman appeared again. This time, all the soldiers froze. The soldiers then hooked up with the Golani engineering force, whose job it was to blow up houses in which were found booby traps. And he said, my son's unit asked them to check these 3 houses, and they found that all 3 of the houses that the woman had warned them away from had been booby trapped." Now the story is just on the rumor mills. It's not accepted, as a bona fide story in the government, shall we say. But it is an interesting story because he says there are soldiers who have been telling it in some places that where they went in, that there was a woman who told them not to enter certain buildings because they were booby trapped, and that her name was Rachel. I asked certain yeshiva dean about this story, and he told me that it was not a made-up story, that he actually knew one of the soldiers involved, and he told me his name. And then Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu told the story. He said, then the yeshiva dean asked me if it was in any way connected with the fact that my father, Rabbi Mordecai Eliyahu, had left the hospital before the war and went to pray not once, not twice, but 3 times at Rachel's tomb, and went nowhere else to pray. I told him I didn't know, but I would ask. He said, I was a little bit afraid to ask my father, but he said I decided to go, and I asked him, quote, "Do you remember that you told us one time about Rabbi Shalom Mutsavi of blessed memory during World War II, when the Germans seemed about to enter the Holy Land, that he prayed at Kiva Rachel against the decree, and that he actually saw Rachel praying?" My father said yes, he remembers. So I told him this story that I'd heard. And I asked him, should we believe? Is this truth? And he said, yes, it's true. He said, I asked him to explain, and he said in these words, quote, "I told her, Rachel, a war is on. Don't withhold your voice from crying based on Jeremiah 31:14 through 16. Go before God and pray for the soldiers who are sacrificing themselves for the nation of Israel, that they should strike and not be stricken." I told him, well, you should know that she really did that. So he asked, did she mention that I sent her? Rabbi Eliyahu's son then continued, if this is the great level of the soldiers, and if this is the great power of prayer, How then can anyone say anything against them? I think that's an interesting story coming out of the war, that Rachel appeared. You remember Rachel is weeping over her children because they are not. Do you remember that biblical story? Well, even though it might have been a metaphor, according to the former head rabbi of Israel, he went to her tomb 3 times and asked her to intervene. And somehow, some way, this lady who was telling those soldiers, go away, get out of here, the houses are booby-trapped, when they asked her her name, she said, I am Rachel, and she said that in Hebrew. I am your mother, Rachel. Well, interesting story. Are these the last days? Do miracles like that happen? Is this war story something we can be excited about? Well, I tell you what, Jesus is coming one of these days. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he didn't have Elijah or Rachel or a few others. Because you remember in the last war, we heard about these angels. In fact, I think it was the 6-Day War, 1967. These giant, in fact, Abraham came and scared off a bunch of Palestinian soldiers. So these are fascinating stories. Always something coming out of an Israeli war. Some kind of miracle type story like that. Interesting. Well, I'm J.R. Church. We'll see you again tomorrow with our analysis of the news.